So I wanted to create this video because I want to talk about something that's been on my mind lately, but I'm having a lot of trouble writing about it because it's just so detailed. I tried writing about it several different ways and I can't sort of wrap my head around it. So I thought maybe if I just start talking about it, I can get the thoughts out there and see what happens, and maybe other people can have some other ideas. So the topic is defining narcissistic abuse, and I think it's a really important topic, and so that's why I want to talk about it. It's been really important for me. It's been monumental in sort of moving the needle forward in my healing process. I think the reason why is because when I first started this, or as I was going through this, I had all of these thoughts and feelings about all of these things that had happened. Like, oh, this thing happened to me over here, this thing happened, this happened a long time ago, I went through this. It was all these little tiny things that had happened, and you know, the pieces, the overwhelming scope of what had happened was just too big to even grasp, really. And so that I'd have one feeling about something that happened over here, a different feeling about something that happened over here, and I couldn't even put everything together and think about what I'd been through because I was too busy processing one thing at a time. And I feel like we have a good sense of other types of abuse and what they are and how they're distinct from one another. We know what physical abuse is. We know what emotional and psychological abuse entail. We know what sexual abuse is, financial abuse, but what is narcissistic abuse? And I read an article the other day saying that up to, I think it was 158 million people in the United States are affected by narcissistic abuse. That's huge. That's more people than are affected by depression. I think it said diabetes. There was a long listing of different physical and mental ailments that that are highly well known, but we don't hear a lot about narcissistic abuse. But it's very impactful, obviously, and we can't even talk about it. We don't even have the language to describe it, because what is it? Obviously, it has psychological and emotional components to it, but there's something else to it. There's this distinct element to it. And I really wanted to be able to think about and talk about what that was, because there was this overarching thing to it that was making it hard for me to conceptualize what had happened to me. And I finally figured out that the way I could talk about it was through describing it as sort of a distortion of reality. That what narcissists do is come in and create a false persona for you. It's this false person that they create based on knowing you, knowing what it is you want, and then being that person for you, and creating this false world for you, this false reality. And they may be doing it with several other people as well, so in a way it's sort of like this false universe is existing. And then you fall in love with that person. It's everything you want, but it's not real. And they're intentionally doing it. They're manipulating you into this false world. And so inevitably, when the cracks start to show in this false world and there's nothing under it, it's not real, what's happened is you, the person in the relationship, have enmeshed with that person who's not real your identity. And so those cracks start to appear in your identity as well. So you're sitting there trying to figure out what's actually real, and it's come into your mind. And so that is abusive. You have somebody who has now twisted your reality. It's twisted your mind, the way you think about things, the way you think about and are now able to trust yourself and your own judgment, your future plans, what's happening in your world, your present. everything now in your life is up for grabs in terms of how you view it and how you think about it. And this has been done to you on purpose, and that is distinct to narcissistic abuse. And it may be held in place by all of these other things. Specifically, there are a lot of psychological and emotionally abusive tactics that are used to do it. But there's this distinct element of narcissistic abuse that's not present in all of these other types of abuse. And I think this is really what defines it, is this distortion of reality. And it's very, very harmful. And once I started understanding that that was the thing that had hurt me, and that is what was keeping me from moving forward, was trying to get out of this fog and figure out what was going on, and then figuring out how to think about it, and even figuring out how to talk about that with other people. Even just understanding that helped me get out of it a little bit and helped me move forward. So I feel like just having ways to conceptualize what happened to us and having ways to talk about it. In other words, not letting the narcissist define it, not letting silence define it, using our words to talk about it, what happened, having ways to put words on it that make it make sense. I think that's very positive and ways to recover from this. So that was step one, but it was incomplete. Just being able to say, this is what narcissistic abuse is. But like I said, it's not complete. Because then when you're trying to describe to someone else what happens in narcissistic abuse, so you say, okay, that's step one. Person creates this false persona. Then you try to get into a little bit to what happened. Because obviously there's a breakdown somewhere. And so that you have to explain more what happened, or you have to think, maybe you're thinking through yourself what happens. So you say the false persona part, and someone's following along outside. Let's say you're explaining to someone else, someone's following along, and so you say, okay, well, so-and-so, the narcissist, has created a false persona, and it was specifically created for me to fall in love with. And it sounds, a little out there. It sounds like you may be getting into movie plot territory, right? But it's digestible. It's something people can at least conceptualize and understand. But it's the next part. It's getting into the next things that you can then layer on top of it, that where everything starts to break down. Because once you say that part, somebody has created a false persona, and then start adding in what happens next, it stops making any sense. So, okay, step one, somebody creates a false persona, and then what happens? Well, then the person that created a false persona just does all these crazy things, like serial cheating and devaluing viciously that person that they got to fall in love with them, and leading these multiple lives, and smearing that person behind their back, and just treating them horribly, and they may physically abuse them too, and just like you may be talking to the other person and they're like, wait a second, that doesn't even make any sense. Why would you go to all this trouble to create a false person to make someone fall in love with you, and then rip that whole relationship apart, right? It doesn't make any sense. And so, well, think about it. It doesn't make any sense to us either. We come out of these relationships asking questions like, did he or she ever love me? Did they know they were hurting me? Did they do it on purpose? How did they move on so quickly? How could they have done these things? We don't even understand it. And so how can we explain it to somebody else? It doesn't make any sense. So you have people outside of it, up here, saying it sounds a little out there, and and then when you start telling me everything, it doesn't make any sense. We know it happened because we went through it, but then we don't understand what was going on either. So I feel like we need the language to talk about it, and I feel like there is gonna be a way to do it. There is a way to do it. And I feel like one of the keys, haven't figured it out yet, but I'm trying to get there. One of the keys is maybe we need to stop just relaying the acts and the effects on us and saying, well, this is what he did, and this is how I felt, this is, what happened to me. Because all that does is say, well, I don't understand, it doesn't make sense. The other person in the equation, is us, the person we're telling, if we're telling somebody else. The other person in the equation is the person that did it, the narcissist. Well, if we think about it from the narcissist's point of view, maybe it will make a little more sense. But I didn't really know how to do that until I started listening to the videos of the self-aware narcissists and reading the work of the self-aware narcissist. Because if you're not a narcissist, how are you going to think like a narcissist? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. But once you start to hear what it is they're thinking, it starts to make a little more sense. You can put yourself in their shoes, and it doesn't mean that you excuse what they did, but at least you can say, okay, well, now I understand why that happened. So, for example, in the example I was just talking about, so the narcissist creates this great persona for someone to fall in love with. Well, why would they then suddenly do all these things to rip it apart? Well, let's think about it from the narcissist perspective. What do we know about narcissists? They're very thin-skinned. It's very easy to activate their sense of shame. And they feel like a lot of things are criticisms that most people wouldn't. They feel if you have a different opinion than they do, you are challenging them or disrespecting them. They feel like a lot of things are disrespectful that most people wouldn't bat an eye at. So if you are, they also have something, a problem with something called object constancy. So if they feel like you have disrespected them or, made them feel like they're bad, brought them down to that level to where they can't feel that inflated sense of self, that they're back to that core sense of shame, they split people, that object constancy problem. They either see people as all good or all bad. All they want to do in that moment is, they're very vengeful, is get back at you, push you away from them. They will forget that they loved you 5 minutes ago, whatever they loved you for. They will forget that they loved you. They will forget that they have, years of history with you, that, everything they ever did for you, everything you ever did for them, all the plans you have together. In that moment, they hate you, and they will do everything they can to destroy you. If you are not they're personality disordered, okay, judgment free for a minute, they're personality disordered. If you're not personality disordered, it doesn't make sense. We can't naturally think like that because we're not personality disordered. But if you understand that that's how they're thinking, suddenly, two incongruent behaviors, I create a persona that people will love, for reasons that I don't, reasons of, I won't get into that here, but there's reasons for that too if you're a narcissist. But I create a persona that people will love, and then I do all these things to rip it apart because I feel like I was devalued first. It makes a whole lot more sense. And I think the reason why that's so important is because once I started to think like a narcissist, to understand why certain things happened, I stopped blaming myself. I stopped having doubts about what happened in the relationship. I stopped thinking, if only I hadn't done that, would things have happened differently? I stopped wondering, I wonder if things are going to be different in the future for him. You know, I hope maybe they will be, but I wonder, you know, what it would take for that to happen. I stopped missing him because I realized that nothing was going to change. So missing him was only going to bring me misery. I stopped feeling bad about the things he said to me because I realized he was splitting me in that moment. That's what he was feeling, and he couldn't stop himself. It doesn't make it okay. It doesn't mean to justify it and say, well, he's perfectly right to have said those things. It just means that's what he was doing. So understanding how he thought moved me really forward in the healing process. It helped me separate me from that relationship and let it go a little further. And I feel like being able to explain this succinctly, not this the length of time it's just taken me just to explain this small part, but to be able to explain this in a way that I can conceptually remind myself what is happening, so that I can keep moving forward and explain it to other people as well, because there are people in our circles that want to help support us, but they don't understand, you know, what we've gone through. And we may meet people in the future and we may want to say, you know, this is what I went through, and just being able to say, here's what it was like. I think having some language around that would be very helpful. And so this is you know, where I am now. These are the thoughts I'm having, is thinking about how did we talk about this. So thanks for listening. I hope to hear from you what you think about this. Bye.